Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I'm going to give you a minute to connect to sound. Hi, and welcome. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs at The Rail, and I'm standing in for our brilliant poetry editor, Anselm Berrigan, to MC's today's poetry reading. We're so excited to welcome you all for this 155th Wednesday poetry reading and the 922nd episode of The Rail's New Social Environment Weekday Conversation Series. Today's reading is curated by Douglas Piccinnini and is titled NEXTS. Joining Douglas are poets Niina Pollari and Ben Fama. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Before passing it over to Douglas for a bit of context around the reading, I'm going to read everyone's bios so you know a bit about today's readers. Ben Fama is the author of the full-length poetry collections Fantasy and Deathwish. His debut novel, If I Close My Eyes, is now available from Sarka Press. He's the editor of Wonder Books and lives in New York City. Niina Pollari is the author of two poetry collections, Path of Totality and Dead Horse, and several chapbooks. She's also the translator from the Finnish of Tytti Heikkinen's The Warmth of the Taxidermied Animal. Her poems, translations, and essays have appeared in Poetry, Granta, The Millions, and other outlets. She lives in Western North Carolina with her family. And Douglas Piccinnini, the curator of today's reading, is the author of Beautiful, Safe, and Free, Blood Oboe, and Storybook, a novella, as well as numerous chapbooks, including A Western Sky and Victoria. His work has appeared in publications like the Brooklyn Rail and American Poetry Review, among others. Piccinnini has been awarded residencies with Art Farm, Nebraska, the Elizabeth Bishop Society of Nova Scotia, the Vermont Studio Center, Sundress Academy for the Arts in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the Mastheads in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. He lives with his wife, Tara, and their son, Oblio, in Frenchtown, New Jersey. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Douglas.
Thanks, Chloe, and thanks everyone for joining us, and also thanks to Ben and Niina for taking time out of their day to spend some time reading with us. Kind of like the origin of the idea of next texts is a way to just kind of connect the past, the present, and the future of the work that we're making as writers. I met both Ben and Niina over 10 years ago in New York, and I imagine that the work that we were making then is much different, or has built upon that work in some ways. So this is just a space to kind of creatively share what we've been up to, what we're working on now, and maybe some stuff that's still a little raw that we might be hoping to publish or put out there sometime in the future. So thanks again, and I'm going to pass it to Ben.
Thanks so much, Douglas, for having me here, and thanks to everyone for spending this time with us. This has been just a nice thing to prepare for and think about, considering everything else going on. And so, yeah, I appreciate the time and Brooklyn Rail for making this space. I'm going to be reading from my new book. It's called If I Close My Eyes, and my publisher's here, Francesca Critico, so I wanted to give a shout out to her for all the work that she did on this. Thanks so much. The chat is open also. I think we all welcome comments. When he woke up, they were making their descent into the Angelino sunset. Jesse had forgotten about the Calabasas fires, which had been raging for the better part of the week. A large plume of smoke hung just below the cloud line. The sky streaked melon and orange. Love Me Like You Do had been playing in his headphones for hours. He'd made it home. He'd almost forgotten how bright Southern California was, pushing sunshine down your throat until you gagged. Sun over waves, sun over glass, sun in the wines, sun over succulents, sun over reruns, sun on traffic, sun over dramas and desperations and timid hookups and last breaths, sun over Skid Row, sunshine over rehab, sun over cell towers, sun on dispensaries, sun pouring over sun, sunshine blasting the closed set, Son buying drugs, January wave, cars overheating and traffic. Lee had a last-minute business dinner he'd taken as a favor and couldn't pick Jesse up from LAX. A potential client, as he described him, was eating with him in his home in Echo Park, and Jesse was to call a car. He was looking forward to seeing him, of course, and he could cover the cost of the ride. Sunsets in New York signified the closing of the daily commercial cycle, a budget-friendly reward for a day's work. Sunsets over Southern California seemed closer to heaven, a bonnet over the sleepy province of ticking desperations. Jesse loved seeing palm trees at night, spellbound by their indifferent sway, riding beneath their grand fronds, which blistered above the halogen lamplight. The blood-red sky eased into darkness as he switched his focus to his phone, where he watched the pillish blue GPS dot on the map, also going for a cruise. The meditation was interrupted by a Los Angeles Times alert saying a shallow magnitude earthquake had just occurred in Joshua Tree. He set the phone down in his lap, letting the backlight redouble in the car window. As with any homecoming, Jesse became filled with pathos and melancholy as he rode along the defamiliarized geography. He rubbed his fingers over his scar, an anxious habit he developed as butterflies rose and fell in his chest. It was now night, and traffic was moderate. Neither he nor the driver spoke. The radio dialed in information about accidents on the freeways. The 110 was down to one lane near the Staples Center, causing a 2-mile backup. The driver took the 405 to the 10. They exited to bypass delays from a stalled vehicle. The residential strips on Venice Boulevard patiently preferred aloe vera, blooming bougainvillea, and wild roses, while odd memories settled. A street of a girl whom he'd taken edibles. They'd gotten awfully stoned, and a day later she desperately looked up, high forever. They'd never spoken since. Once his father had taken him to the Grove to a movie. Jesse went to use the restroom and simply walked out into hard sun instead, fueled by rage, defiantly running for blocks toward his mother's burial plot, eventually becoming lost in Beverly Hills in the afternoon when landscapers were the only people outdoors. The solitary life Jesse had led of late, and the melancholy subjects on which he had suffered his thoughts to dwell, had rendered him at times susceptible to the thick-coming fancies of a mind newly innervated. Since the shooting, he'd been living in quotations, as if drawn into a narrative steered by higher powers. He'd also been flirting with a what does it all mean moment, the eternal return of horrible feelings he hadn't felt possessed by since his mother passed. When he first processed his mother's death in therapy, he told of a recurring dream of a cloaked figure hung above the foot of his bed. He frequently woke himself to shouts and cries, as if there were something to be fought with there. A shadow self of him had died alongside his mother, and he learned to ask what that iteration needed, how to love him. The flood of emotions the technique required settled now anew. He'd also been riding the bombastic high of being reported on in the news, all that frenetic attention. He could be recognized by anyone at any time. Lee built his house, the Chateau, in Angelino Heights in 2005. And as Jesse pulled onto Carroll Avenue past the Victorian manors and familiar fan palms, he induced the nostalgia of the paradise he'd made of it when he was younger. The house was 4,600 square feet and had plenty of space. 2 full living rooms with fireplaces, a dining room, kitchen, hot tub, pool, private gardens, and secluded terraces. It was painted soft green with white trim, ironically stately and awkward among the legacy homes around it. The house was something of a gay domestic haven, an enviable wreath of Lee's fortunes. Too personal to be used as an income tool through popular rental outlets, the well-tended grounds inflected the specific and separate character of its owner. The chateau was also something of a stage actor's paradise, each room having taken on the quality of a set. The kitchen with its permanent rotation of tidy place settings, glinting counters, blooming orchids, overflowing bowls of fruit. The art hung in the hall spilled into the living room. It was a highlight of visiting the chateau. An image of Anthony Andrews holding a teddy bear from Brideshead Revisited appeared next to solemn signed stills of Kathy Griffin and Regis Philbin. The photo of Jesse and Lee in tuxedos at the Emmys was framed in a less than earnest gauche gilt frame. It was their celeb wall, as they called it, though the moniker was cheeky, and all of the featured stars were friends or acquaintances. Juliette Binoche, Naomi Watts, Johnny Depp, Meryl Streep, Kate Blanchett, Greg Araki, Adrian Brody, Henry Fonda, Dustin Hoffman, Gregory Peck, Robert Altman, Liza Minnelli, Cher, Jodie Foster, Shirley MacLaine, Ingrid Bergman, Signe Pollock. The fact of the installation itself occasioned gifts, and finally, when Hal Ashby gave Lee a signed color snapshot of Marilyn Monroe, white stole, black halter, on his 40th birthday, they considered the installation finished. Lee's office was rarely shown, carpeted in a deep, halting, high pile red, and several models of the Queen Elizabeth luxury liner sat near his desk in a glass vitrine left over from a high camp show he'd worked on that was set at sea. He'd installed a modest chandelier, hung gold frames on the soft yellow walls. Jesse had claimed the entire downstairs floor, which opened to the back of the pool as living quarters. Its open plan included a cavernous interior of leather and various neon lights. The design was inspired by Lee's first experiences with sexuality he'd had in a vicious and bawdy leather club in Budapest in the 1980s. After finding the house empty, he located Lee sitting out back beneath the lamps that delineated the edge of the porch from the beginning of the deck around the pool. Lee looked as Jesse remembered, slim and short with a petite swimmer's frame, wearing a short sleeve button-up and white shorts. More gray swarmed his trim stubble and hairline. Someone Jesse couldn't place sat with him, soft-faced with pale skin and dressed in all black. His hair was dyed incompatibly black for his age. His youthfully messy mop swept over his head, a look complicated by thin-rimmed glasses. Lee introduced the man as Brian. They were both drinking absinthe, which seemed odd to Jesse. Brian was in development with the French video game company. They screened their last game at Cannes. Put Willem Dafoe and Elliot Page in front of the screen, he said, teasing the glass from one angle to another so his eyes tinkled in a circle. We're talking about a huge budget. They had Hans Zimmer do that soundtrack. I'm going to do this one myself, though. Maybe bring in some collaborators. That's what all the big players are doing now. He had a blunt arrogance and industry overconfidence filtered through a West Coast fry. Look, we're talking 30 million, he said with finality, as if that fact alone would guarantee interest, which it did. We give them a great story, and they develop the sensible, functional game mechanics for us. He explained that years ago he developed a fantasy horror film that languished in post-production. He was repackaging it as a video game narrative. He wanted Lee to continue developing the story and suggested he shoot live-action scenes in his signature dream sequence style. I want the fucked psychological feeling in the horror genre, he said. I want Eli Roth Goes to the Beach, Michael Haneke does House of a Thousand Corpses, all mixed with the horrible theater of paranormal activities, an M. Night Shyamalan drama of uncertainty and suspense, but the twist is that the world is more fucked up than we're comfortable to admit. The horror is in reality. Reality is the scariest thing. I want to demonstrate that. A participatory funny games, Lee said, looking over the glinting inflections of the pool, which, as you know, I shot. For sure, no doubt, Brian said. As they talked, Jesse slowly realized he was speaking with Marilyn Manson. Though he knew Lee to take a meeting out of politeness, he also followed serious money as much as aesthetic compatibility, and it seemed like here there could be a lot. His thought was to convince them to pass the job down to him, or for Lee to allow him to co-write, imagining this as a launchpad to real Hollywood. Wait, I know you, right? Brian said then, leaning forward and focusing intently on Jesse, who felt locked into the scope of attention. Dude, you were like shot, right? Lee paled. Jesse looked over the bottle of absinthe, the pool sentient quivering. It was the first time he felt forced to take ownership of the incident. Yeah, Jesse said, leaning back and lifting his shirt. Lee recoiled as Brian examined the small slash upon his thin frame, his body otherwise coated in a thin layer of Virgin Airlines particulate. Then he turned around, showing him the exit wound, craning his neck to get a view himself. There was less to see on his lower back, a wartish pink polyp near his waistline. Lee's face soured as he squinted to bring the wounds into focus. Jesse felt sickened that he'd shown himself off this way, decided he'd never do it again. We should talk sometime, actually. I'd like to get your perceptions on the horror present in said scenario. I was thinking this game would start in media res, like you choose one of several characters whose story collides and refracts with the others. Jesse went inward, thinking of Mars, turning her name over in his head, Marzi Rose Arenas, then thought of the hospital, the unknowable dead technician, then his late mother. When she passed, he was told she went to heaven, but that thought faded like a rose. It was the 2-week anniversary of the shooting, and here the industry was already absorbing the narrative, novelizing it for popular consumption, showing little of the outrage that was present when Christina Grimmie had been similarly murdered. Jesse felt naive in his spungness that he could master the narratives in his life. The trio sat in extended silence. Well, maybe you could co-write it or get an advisory credit. That's something that could be great for this project, don't you think? Brian asked Lee. Maybe, Lee frowned. To imagine is to see. Jesse perked at this. The phrase was a sure tell Lee wasn't interested. He said it when the answer was going to be no. Brian finished his drink and slowly stood. They shook hands, and Lee saw Brian out through a squeaky side gate. Jesse stood over the rippling water, the quiet of the night, the gauche glass of absinthe the remainder of the evening, until Lee returned. It's really good to see you, Lee said, rubbing Jesse's shoulder. Jesse leaned in for a sort of side hug, which they held tight for a moment. Do screenwriters really write video games? Jesse was skeptical. Lee laughed. Yes, actually, it's a huge market. Jesse wanted badly to ask the next question, but balked. I have so little interest in this, it's all yours, Lee said, to Jesse's satisfaction. But that stays between. Write the Presse, consider it practiced. If it's good, he paused. I'll say we co-wrote it and pass it on. Jesse offered to clean up. Lee patted him on the back again, then went inside. It was the most touch Jesse had felt in months. The air smelled like fennel and chlorine. A sudden jolt of melancholy rippled through his nervous system. He stared at the small amount of liquor calmly stirring about the tumbler, wondering what would happen if he drank it. He'd been dry from alcohol for years. He felt exhausted, emotionally wrecked. Conditions he'd been warned led to getting drunk. He held it to his nose, recoiling from the sweet burn that rushed through his nostrils. He sat with his feet in the water and looked on his phone for messages from Mars. Their meeting was imminent, as soon as tomorrow. He'd extrapolated a lot from the pictures she'd posted online. She occasionally worked as a spokesperson. She had a robust modeling portfolio and healthy, active lifestyle, not just relatable, but likable, the winning type of limited liability persona people feel comfortable putting their reputation and money behind. He felt humiliated by his crush and embarrassed of this optimism. He found there, however, something to be excited about. He lifted the glass and admired the emerald color, baring his nose a second time, inhaling deep into his lungs. Instead, he poured it into the pool, laying back, looking up at the sky over Echo Park, Los Angeles, California, the only truth of existence being a composite of cellulite material held together in a wounded body, however temporarily, in space, in time, an organism that persisted. The whole of his sense of self now returned to the town of Our Lady, Queen of the Angels, splendidly, as it were. Thank you so much.
Do I just jump in now? Okay. Thank you, Ben. Do you know, did you see me hold up your book? I have it here like next to me. So, okay, I'm gonna read a few poems from Path of Totality, and then I'm gonna read a few new poems which I've never read anywhere, so we'll see how that goes. Next text, right? Okay, so I'll be holding this even though you won't see it. Urine season. Summer in New York is urine season. Everything has an odor. The hot rain comes and hoses down the sidewalk, but the smell remains, floating there as warmth on live skin. People toss bottles out of their cars, and the bottles explode over the sidewalk, or they stay closed and roll to a stop, then cook for days next to an architecturally famous building. Last time it was urine season, I was expecting. That's how you say it. You don't say what you're expecting. I didn't know what I expected, but now I know. I held my pee on every corner of this town, waiting to meet my daughter. This year, I've been watching a live stream of a falcon nest. On a ledge above the sidewalk are 3 falcon hatchlings. They wait and watch in their rocky nest, knowing that their parents will bring them smaller birds to eat. There were 4 eggs in the nest, but the 4th didn't hatch. The 3 remaining hatchlings grow larger and more dangerous each day. They rip apart tanagers and starlings as they learn the ways of predation. They shit over the edge of the building. The excrement drips down the side. Today, the falcons left. This is a poem about expectation. At the hospital, I had a catheter. It leaked on the bed, on the sheets, against my legs. Someone came in and asked where my baby was, not seeing the decal on the door. I have never felt as helpless. It's urine season again. It will be again and again. We will feel this way again. Some will say this is not a poem for them, but I say it's a poem for anyone who ever expected anything. When the desolation comes. Happiness is real only once you leave it behind, but why would anybody leave it? Once I went down the stairs, and when I came back up, I was different. Where are you, darling? I'm here. A successful movement in a poem is surprising, but this is not. It's cruel to expect surprise from me. I hope when the desolation comes for you and grips you by the wrist and flings you into the night, you happen to be clutching your insurance paperwork. A couple of these I've never read, so if I stumble, that's why. There is no word. I wanted to write a true poem. I started with a fact. She had soft hair. I know because I touched my chin to it when I held her. The truth is that when I held her, neither of us cried. A fetus passes its genetic material to its mother, beginning at 6 weeks gestation. The mother carries it with her even when the fetus, now a child, parts from her body. The mother becomes a genetic chimera, feeling as if her children are with her even when they're not. When I was a small child, I walked with my daycare provider across a street every day to a playground. Down the street there was a church whose roof was being leafed with bright copper. Later, the copper roof oxidized to a matte green. It surprised me because I didn't understand yet that some changes are chemical, irreversible. The truth is that inside a car, driving past a field where dusk almost touches the ground, sometimes you can see a shooting star as it burns green and falls. The copper of its body lights on fire as it enters this atmosphere. It's visible only for a short time and then it's gone. I walk through the body of every day like an organism being born, through the red gel and muck of the underbelly, through all the female pain. I say I walk, but in truth, there is no word for the locomotion that I do. Interim. In the interim before the disaster, I transform into the Godhead. The transformation is so easy, it's almost aesthetic. Suddenly, I exude an amniotic appeal and leave trails of cervical mucus that allow me to be followed. My nipples are targets. My body's hairs are individual, like lovingly made line drawings. I am full of blood and food. Being the Godhead gives me a voice that is many whispers driven into one voice. It makes me compelling to everyone I address. It's just like listening to the woman of your dreams. And you know what the disaster is. You have seen it in your own dreams. A mountaintop blows inward like a face hit with a fire extinguisher. The brown cantaloupes roll into the acid ocean. But the good news is that I can save us all so easily. This poem is not insane. In the interim before the disaster, we can hear the thunder and look upon the signage as it illuminates letter by brass letter, live, laugh, love, and we can recognize ourselves for what we really are. There's a lot of body goo in these poems and also in my new poems. Motherhood and like, I don't know, all that. I guess that's just what I write about now. Good times. Maternity coat. I walk through another winter without you. I'm wearing a coat that has another baby's spit up on it. It's a faint outline near the collar. When it comes to clothes, I am following a well-worn tenet. Dress for the job you want. Just one more from the book. Once there was a sunflower. Once there was a sunflower on a fire escape across from my own. It grew slowly as plants do from a small pot. I did not notice it until it was huge, its big head on its small stalk, wobbling hilariously in the wind. The surprise of seeing the sunflower made me laugh. It's so big, I kept saying. How did I not notice? I have a blind spot. I now know this. In the maternity ward, there was an emblem on our door of a calla lily, the flower of funerals. The emblem was there to warn anyone entering about the atmosphere of the room. All the other rooms in the ward received sunflower emblems. Behind my funeral door, so much of my blood was gone that I felt completely dried of everything. But urine still leaked from my catheter, a muted yellow, my body ejecting more than I thought it was capable of ejecting. In the lily room, they gave me the blood of a stranger, and I took it, and I let it rehydrate my body like a plant being watered. Sunflowers are like a total eclipse. They are dark in the middle, with a corona that extends. During an eclipse, animals and plants go to sleep. They start to wind down, tucking their legs under their bodies, closing their leaves. Bats begin hunting. Mosquitoes start biting. When the eclipse is over, they experience stress because what happened is not what they expected. I realize now that you came from the eclipse. You were sucked back into it when it was over, when our time together came to an end. You were beautiful and world-ending. You shocked me with your beauty, and I became so scared. A blind spot burned into my retina, a permanent hole, like film chewed by heat. Sunflowers are sunny. Why wouldn't that be? Later at the grief group, each participant brought in a flower to create a big bouquet. We were sad people in a room, and the bouquet was for all our babies. I brought in the biggest flower, a sunflower. It had the tallest stalk. It had the biggest head as it glowed there, dark in the middle. Now I'm going to read from my screen, so you'll see me doing side-eye. Okay, these are new poems. Great Void. I get up in the darkness of the morning knowing the light will come. There is no love in what I do for myself. I gag on the toothbrush, but I don't spit. I pour a little coffee, scrape debris, wipe the surfaces of anything that would catch the human eye. No cataclysm, just noticing small events. The skin loosening underneath the chin in geologic time. The room is like a window, and outside nobody looks. Long ago, I came to understand that I do want to be here, but there is also a shadow fastened to my feet. Even if I run, I can't leave it, and sometimes it walks ahead of me even into a room. First thing someone sees, structure of my shape, not a shadow, but a black hole, mine. Letdown. There is a bodily reflex called the letdown that a baby triggers when feeding. It allows milk to surge to the baby's demands. When you pump milk without a baby, it can be really difficult to let down. You'd think it was just a reaction to stimuli, but the body is smart. It knows the difference between plastic and baby lips. I am working while the baby is off in someone else's care. That someone is also working and probably not paid enough. I'm working to sweep little bits of abstract money into my 401k so the children don't have to take care of me in the bleak future, instead of holding the baby's wonderful weight in the now and gazing into his sweet face in the now. I'm betting that money will still have value. I'm assuming we all survive until the abstract then. I'm making a lot of assumptions here. I put on a YouTube meditation for pumping success. Try to visualize my baby in my arms to fool my milk ducts. I let myself and probably others down on a daily basis. I guess it's different when the letdown is the goal. Reverse Dorian Gray. I look like the worst version of myself that has existed so far. My abdomen is shattered by stretch marks, the skin thin where the collagen ruptured. I garden wrinkled marigolds outside while the baby sleeps. It's the heat of summer and the sun's rays fondle me damagingly. When I pick up the baby from his sleep, he puts his face in my armpit and huffs. I haven't showered since Monday, and it's Thursday. No, wait, it's Friday. Every day something happens that makes me want to secede from humanity. But as long as I don't look at the temperature or read the news or check the mirror in any type of artificial light or any light source that is off to only one side of me, I feel pretty good in my heart. Apex predator. Apex predatorship is not defined by what the organism hunts or kills, or what hunts or kills it, but what it eats. Based on its diet, an organism is given what's known as a trophic score, placing it at a certain level. Plants score 1, herbivores score 2, and so on up to 5. Animals on the highest levels are hunters that have no natural predators and that eat only meat, such as orcas, boa constrictors, or river otters. A human who eats a diet of plants would score differently than one who eats meat, though trophic levels are not typically calculated on an individual level, but a species level. A human would score on average about a 2.2, around the same as a pig or anchovy. I once dated a guy who was a self-proclaimed Marxist. He held a deep sympathy for the agrarian workers employed by factory farms in Florida. He identified himself politically with communist movements in Latin America. He said that owning a pet was bourgeois and that buying pet food when there were people who had food insecurity was sick. He knew I was a vegetarian, but once when he made me dinner, he included bacon in the pasta. I didn't think you'd mind, he said. He got a dog eventually. He has since died, so I don't feel weird writing this poem. In fact, I feel that he would find it funny. Poetry. Once I had a poetry teacher who looked at my poems with no ability to understand them. I was a young woman and he was an old man. I'm not implying anything with this, just telling you the facts. I wrote a poem about taking drugs, and he said, "This poem is in the shape of a pregnant woman. This is a poem about motherhood." And so it was, because when the poem leaves the brain like an insect leaves its onion of a nest, the author's intent ceases to matter. The poem morphs, like mine did that day, into a predecessor of the poems I am writing now. So many in the room nodded, yes, motherhood. Every day I walked home from the class down the same route, a road with no sidewalk. I had to dodge cars. Sometimes the teacher rode past me, and once he yelled something. But the worst day was the day I was stung by 3 bees. Okay, last one. Orchard, autumn. The snap of this new apple. The skin gives, but the flesh is firm. Sounds like me postpartum. We've brought the kids to the orchard to look at how things grow. My son squints at a pumpkin, has no idea. It's almost as hot as a summer day. My daughter walks into the sunflowers, which are twice her height. I ask if I can take her picture, and she says no. So now the memory will live a life like so many memories do. Without a photo, her image will grow with her actual person. When I am old and she's an adult, I will see her adult person walking into the flowers in my mind's eye. When I am old, haha, I am already a little bit old and she a little big. Every day, the picture changes somewhat. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, Niina. And thanks also, Ben. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in and staying on. I'm going to read a couple poems from my new book, Beautiful, Safe, and Free. And then I'm going to read some poems that I've never really read before. Anoint your eyes with dark. The sun sets and the weight remains. The sun sets to keep the gossip boiling. The sun sets is what Thursday's gold has kept you from. The sun sets to avow the market, to refreeze intonation. The sun sets grease blue-green water screen towards bronze and towards silver. The sun sets this body of birdsong over the Houses of Parliament. The sun sets tearing at the chapped mouth of ambition. The sun sets on an Eiffel Tower poster over their desk. The sun sets on a uniform of white hair and enamel veneers. The sun sets on a grain stack, and I swear, mint dark by true purple. The sun sets on a broadcast of increase, the incense of catastrophe curling away. The sun sets to reach roughly towards misplaced visions of you. The sun sets in ropes of smoke instead of wreaths of flowers. The sun sets working the egg and touching butter heat. The mist finally upsetting our eyes. A handshake away. The clutter safely guarded. I thought I'd have an audience. The two trees and the one aching. Two chairs facing west, two of us. As I had intended to put my breath in a flower. As it ends, light of day by light of night, a fresh scent dismissed from the leaves, my leaves cooling in the tonal slack, like an extension cord, like a tired libretto in electorate fashion. New scenery made by what is missing. Cries, 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 and the wonder ringing. But what about this? What about this pinched from a bigger self of yesterday we were this, today we are that. Intention meets our own delinquency. The way one thing loading and reloading sends us backwards, sends us backwards, sends us backwards. There are no words. Are the words wiping down the life dust of what to make and unmake gossip say? The last thing you say, checking the waves of land here and land where the clover is flush, where there wasn't us. The circumstance bends, breaks. Lean against everything's brick wall. Blackout evening. Today in haunted memories, who's the time to stay unloved? Ghost of, I can't imagine. The name you'd half say, dead tree you've been hiding in, a horn so loud, etc. Yeah, I remember. Heavy, sagging, wet diaper, all around, within. Ghost of, I should have. To keep a stranger unharmed is childhood plus its opposite. Nobody could unring the bell. Loss of faith is free, might will lead tomorrow. The so-called parental love in this garden of the world. You learn, you're learning by example. Word for living simulation. Word for big smoking screen sky. It's difficult to sleep. Crying, I take a shower. Sleeping, I awake. Carved into pine. One finger in my mouth, one finger in my ear. Feeding on the syrup of yesterday, feeding on a slow show of seeing the snow and its mission to fall, seeing a drink I've ordered arrived, and the company of another's quest to not be tempted to kiss my head, or hiding one quick feeling, so to split open my head with happiness. To split open my head with happiness like something novel and soft, to love from a distance, taking in information like sweet and slightly sour foam. I was going to read a longer thing, but it's too long. I don't have my attention with me, so I won't. Idiotic whistling. A good show of your throat thick with sapa or heaving bleachy phlegm, that while they swabbed your head with resin, they dabbed your skin with garum and ate you, or coming from a place of love. What do you say? To remember the only animal that shits in pottery saw their face cleanly shaved. Take wing. Your life, stars, sun, halogen lamps pound the empty, worked from clay. The door opens and your eyes open and the morning glories open, yet days. So fast the first sour dawn in the season activates this phase. You can't rejoin the cracked homecoming of time, but seek to. 3 breaths and waves makes the eye pins turn. The air plump, nets fragments of weeks like small tropical fish. The rerun of deranged woe will end, and this alone will rally the tulips. I do. As red years storm by, lips also red, wait again to spread, to make a new sound. What was it you wanted? Word for coming down off the cross, word for climbing back up, word for both hands in your mouth. From a salary of meaning, from a blood-splotched egg, from a green congesting. All day, once again, I stand hammering a thought into elegiac blue, to hope, to hope, to hope, to hope, to hope to feed the sun. But what is happening beyond, the blanket feed of everything beyond, just a peek at the not yet you beyond, and be among a deepening blue-green, and drink from a scalding pink wave upon discharged wave. Tomorrow's hand feels the string descending. Tomorrow's hand plays the string, plays the string. Tomorrow, that colorful spring, tomorrow. And this isn't for you to thicken the air above your head and hear then the song of the sorry, you mistaken, as one note sung and sung to stitch melody. The blue flavor scratching behind a thin wall, the dark blue hell of sour dawn, the whipped white blue sea facing sky, blue gold finding a chord in some tangy musk, burning up the breeze, burning old flame, burn higher, 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 so that touching empty is touching you. There's a way to you, settling, cloud-like lift, already and suddenly to have burned out a feeling forever. The taste of green wood, what a grab a trout from the stream. The hostile strategies keep me from you. Between earth and sun and the cost of whatever life means is meant. Was it blue on lighter blue or gold on more gold? A thought snapping as the speech reaching the not yet you. For you, the container. For you laugh and weep over sadness instead of flowers. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. It's my time.
Wow. Thank you all so much. That was so brilliant and so inspiring. Thank you for your readings. And thank you to everyone who could join us today for this reading. It's been such a pleasure being in company of you all for this reading. If you're free next Wednesday, we're hosting a reading curated by Mimi Tempest. And the NSE program, the New Social Environment, is every weekday at 1 p.m. And tomorrow we're hosting a conversation with the gallerist Sean Kelly between Kelly and Phyllis Tuckman, our editor at large, with the concluding reading by Marissa Crawford. But now, without further ado, we are going to do that thing where we throw open the mics and we allow everyone to say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much from me and everyone at the Rail for being here today.
Thank you for the beautiful, beautiful reading, everyone. Incredible.
Thanks, everyone. Great reading.
Thank you.
So inspiring today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Douglas. Thank